It's time for the decider matches in Group D. These are the final matches of all of the group stages here at the Mythic Invitational. Tomorrow begins the round of 16. Who will the last two players be? It's time to find out. Let's bring out our next match's competitors, the decider match contestants. This gentleman goes by the name of Adver from Japan, was one of the top 8 players on Magic the Gathering Arena invited here. Let's welcome to the stage, Taiju Sugiyama. Now, Adver has been doing some very unusual deck lists. I believe no one even matches any of his lists remotely close. A Rakdos aggro and a Jund warrior deck going up against Adver. We just saw him have a very swift victory in the previous round with mono blue and mono red. From Poland, let's welcome Piotr Glogowski. The only player in the entire tournament to be bringing mono blue, which was one of the most in vogue decks after Autumn Burchett's win at MC Cleveland. Gentlemen, good luck, have fun, off to your decider match, to your stations, and now to the casters for the last match set of the day.
All right, here we go, everyone. It is the final 2 games to decide our final 2 spots in the top 16. It is Adver versus Glogowski. Paul, what do you think of these decks? Certainly 3 of them we haven't seen that much of this week.
Right. The one deck that I really found to be very kind of out of the box is the Jund Warriors deck. We got to see Adver actually kind of do what the deck was meant to do. He had a savage turn against New Montanami where he went Goblin Chainwhirler, ability on the stack, cast status, and wiped out the entire board of New Montanami's board. And so that's that was a very innovative deck that he brought to the table. At the same time, red-black aggro. And when asked, hey, why? Everybody going into this tournament often chose 2 different strategies. Yeah. Why 2 aggro decks? And he just goes, I only play one way. I like aggro. So 2 Chainwhirler decks from Adver, not the mono-colored variants, Slight Splash with the red-black, and of course Jund Warriors using unclaimed territory to play a lot of other green and black spells.
Player after my own heart. Go fast, smack face.
Yeah.
Great. Glogowski on the other side, the only player to bring up the blue tempo. But let's take a look first at Adver's Jund Warriors.
And look at this beautiful mana base here. It's very painful. You have all the shock lands here with the Blood Crypt and Stomping Ground and Overgrown Tomb. However, look at that unclaimed territory. That's a very key card here, allowing you to cast all of these different spells. You have Goblin Chainwhirler, very, very difficult to cast because it has a heavy mana commitment. However, if you name Warrior on unclaimed territory, that gives you the flexibility to play a bunch of green creatures like Crawler Harpooner, Growth Chamber Guardian, and that Gruul Spellbreaker.
Taking a look now at the sideboard.
And taking a look at the sideboard here, you're going to see a bunch of these powerful effects, but keep in mind, Glogowski has not brought a Mastermind's Acquisition deck. So the only way that Adver can actually cast any of these cards from his sideboard is by playing Direfleet Daredevil, but of course doesn't have Mastermind's Acquisition to copy, so his sideboard not really going to be seeing play in this matchup.
All right, taking a look now at the red-black aggro. Pretty much a mono-red deck, just with a splash for Carnival Carnage and the Rixmati Reveler's Spectacle cost.
Right, and we saw the Rixmati Reveler do some extra work. However, this is actually a deck that's looking to go slightly bigger, as you can see, maybe specifically for the mono-red mirror, potentially. He has additional copies of Legion Warboss, the full 3 copies, and it's actually playing a little bit less removal. It's not playing Wizard's Lightning because, of course, it's not playing Viashino Pyromancer. Instead, it's playing Rixmati Reveler, which isn't a wizard, and you can only really play Wizard's Lightning with a critical mass of wizards in your deck. So, pretty solid card. Really interested in Carnival Carnage and how that's been playing out for him throughout the course of this tournament.
And then the only mono-blue tempo deck amongst all the submissions. We're pretty familiar with this one after Cleveland, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, there were multiple copies of this mono blue tempo deck at the last Mythic Championship, and it was very, very impressive, and it did a lot of work. But as you can see, Glogowski, because this is a best of one environment, he has kind of changed up his deck a little bit to kind of shore up his matches against the aggressive decks. If you see down there's 2 copies of Surge Mare. Now, this is often a sideboard card in a best of 3 environment, but because, of course, you can't play, you're only playing best of 1, he decided to put a couple of copies of Surge Mirror in the main deck so that he has a couple of blockers while he tries to win in the air with cards like Terramander, Siren Storm Tamer, and that Mistcloaked Herald.
That pony is a difficult little horse to get through, I'll tell you that.
Oh,
Taking a look now at the mono red aggro deck. Pretty standard, no surprises here. Little extra copies of Skewer the Critics.
Yeah, and Glogowski really cheating on his mana here.
Ooh,
Most of the
18.
mono red aggressive decks are playing 20 lands.
Yeah, roughly.
And Glogowski opting for 18, going, you know what? I'm just not going to play the full 4 copies of Experimental Frenzy. I'm going to play more burn spells. And then I'm going to look to rely on cards like Light Up the Stage and possibly even Runaway Steamkin to give me some of that mana back.
Looking at the tail of the tape here, Adver started playing in 2015. Piotr having started playing in 2012. 9 Mythic championships for him. Lifetime Arena games as well. Pretty respectable on both sides, and yeah.
But as you can see, this is something that you're going to see from all the challengers who qualified via the top 8 of the MTG Arena ladder. The last few days was a huge grind where a bunch of these players played a ton of matches to make sure they secured that top 8 slot. Because honestly, this is kind of the tournament of a lifetime. If you qualify for this and you win, it's $250,000.
Oh, yeah.
So there were a ton of players. All of the people that I knew who played competitive Magic in any capacity were giving constant updates as to where they were on that ladder to try to get one of those top 8 slots.
Taking a look at the opening hand here for Adver. Dragon Skull Summit and a Mountain in the opening hand with the Gitu Lava Runner and early removal in Carnival. No 2-drop, though, to be seen, and no 3rd mana source going first. On the other side, though, we see the mono-red deck. 2 Mountains, Gitu Lava Runner, Lightning Strike, Steamkin. Maybe slightly better hand being on the play. I mean, sorry, on the draw.
Yes, definitely. And this is actually going to... This is the matchup that I'm actually really interested in seeing, because when I look at the configuration from Adver, it kind of looks to me like, yeah, he tried to tweak his deck a little bit so he has a slight edge against the other aggressive decks in the format. By going slightly bigger, having cards like the Rixmati Reveler means you have an additional creature that is a lot better against Goblin Chainwhirler, right? Viashino Pyromancer, sure, it's a good card against the control decks of the format, but it leaves yourself very vulnerable to Goblin Chainwhirler.
Starting things off with a cordial hello, hello, and matching Gitu Lava Runners. I swear these players were reading each other's minds.
Right here, and...
Rixmati Reveler being played on turn 2, able to discard and draw a card, finding Experimental Frenzy. That's pretty good. No 3rd land source yet for Piotr.
And this is the problem with playing Runaway Steamkin on the draw against the Chainwhirler deck. Glogowski looking at that Steamkin going, should I run this out? But if my opponent follows this up with a Chainwhirler, I'm going to be really far behind on the board.
Deciding not to play the Steamkin, but getting the 2nd Gitu Lava Runner down, leaving up Wizard's Lightning. Gitu Lava Runners, of course, being a little tougher to get rid of.
And Adver needs a land here to be able to play one of the 3-drops in hand, but misses.
Oh. Will he be tempted here to play the Runaway Steamkin and hope there's no removal in the hand of Piotr? But
I will say, if there's one person who knows how to play with and against Goblin Chainwhirler, it's the guy who submitted 8 copies of it into this tournament.
Fair point. All right, so...
And look at this.
Steamkin.
He's waiting. He's waiting to draw a land, so if he does draw a land, he can have a sequence where he goes Runaway Steamkin into Carnival, which would then make it so that the Steamkin will at least not die to a Goblin Chainwhirler.
Still no land, no 3rd land source yet for Piotr.
Yeah, very interesting. And Glogowski actually opting not for a Wizard's Lightning end of turn there to kind of get some of those burn spells out of his hand.
Again, on the other side of the board, no 3rd land for either player yet. Fanatical Firebrand hitting the board. Carnival Carnage still available for Adver. Wizard's Lightning and Lightning Strike options in the hand of Piotr.
And one of the keys in this mono-red matchup, oftentimes it's the last creature standing that typically wins. What you want to be doing actually with all of your burn spells is just removing all the creatures off your opponent's battlefield and then trying to win with, anything, whatever sticks. A Gitu Lava Runner, a Runaway Steamkin, whatever you want. That's generally the way you want to be playing the matchup. And I actually think specifically for the mono-red matchup, while it might be awkward that, you can't run out Runaway Steamkin on turn 2, I believe being on the draw is not even that necessarily that bad, because that does give you an additional opportunity to find an extra removal spell. And this is something that Magic players who've played a long time ago remember, where the correct thing to do in the actual mono red mirror was to choose to draw so that you have an extra shock or an extra lightning strike for your opponent's creatures.
Third land being found for Piotr, so that will be a slight relief for him. What does he do now here?
And now Glogowski can play a Runaway Steamkin if he wants, as he does have the ability to play a Runaway Steamkin and protect it with a Wizard's Lightning, giving it an additional counter, which helps him play around something like a Goblin Chain Whirler. The only thing is it's a little bit awkward because a Fanatical Firebrand is on the battlefield, but Adver choosing to block here.
Block and sack to try and get rid of these
but this is big. This is a huge tempo advantage for Canister. Adver has now lost both of his creatures to a single Wizard's Lightning.
Carnival Carnage dispatching of the one Gitsu Lava Runner that the Fanatical Firebrand targeted. Here comes the third land for Piotr.
Canister's going, just don't draw land number 3. Please don't draw land number 3.
It's not land number 3, but it is a Fanatical Firebrand that's going to go kablooey and get rid of this Runaway Steamkin.
Yep.
Bye-bye. Into the bin you go. Goblin Chain Whirler for Glogowski.
Yeah, and I can't. He can either go for the Goblin Chain Whirler or Runaway Steamkin into Skewer the Critics. This does leave him vulnerable to something like a Shock that Adver could be having in hand. Playing a Goblin Chain Whirler is fairly safe because he can play the Chain Whirler, and with 1 mana, there's no spell that Adver could have on his turn to kill the Chain Whirler. But it looks like he's going for the Steamkin here instead.
Legion Warboss hitting the board, applying some pressure. Getting a blocker up.
Oh man, and this is going to be potentially a huge turn for Canister here. He can choose to attack with just Gitsu Lava Runner and try to get some spectacle going, or just fire off a main phase Skewer the Critics, paying full price to get in for 5 points of damage.
Yeah, get those blockers out of the way. I wish to make friends with your face. Still no fourth land there for Adver, but being able to get rid of that Runaway Steamkin is pretty big.
Right.
Runaway Steamkin's not called Runaway for no reason. Can go crazy.
Oh, and look at this. Light up the stage.
Twice.
Very, very good in multiples here. Just continuing to draw additional cards. And this is one of the really important cards in the matchup. I know you're going to have to trigger the Spectacle, but it is a source of card advantage. And that's what this matchup really comes down to. You want to be able to just be ahead on resources against your opponents.
Opting not to play the second light of the stage there with the Spectacle cost enabled. The fourth land being found for Adver. Goblin Chain Whirler dealing damage, but not killing any creatures on the board, unfortunately. Vyashina Pyromancer will get in for 2.
He will be able to play a Pyromancer here. Use the Spectacle on the light up the stage. Try to find a 3 damage spell to get that Chain Whirler off the battlefield. Fails to do so.
He's going to go down to 3 here if we play the Mountain and the Pyromancer.
However, he can now just choose to attack with both of the creatures, and Adver needs to block Goblin Chain Whirler. If he eats the Gitsu Lava Runner, he will die to Mountain Vyashina Pyromancer.
Oh, this is so close. If this Mountain and Pyromancer hit the board, he will be on 1 life.
Yeah, and the only
with
card
3 creatures on the board.
Yep, we've said it, we've called it before. He's going to need a Goblin Chain Whirler. And even then, Glogowski has multiple draws at finding a singular point of damage here for the win.
Considering his options here, does he want to commit this Pyromancer and possibly get Chain Whirled? He says, no thank you.
That's very interesting though, because now he chose to play around Chain Whirler, but now he doesn't have a lethal attack because Adver has 2 blockers on the battlefield.
So Runaway Steamkin will come down here, as well as the Pyromancer, otherwise it will get exiled at the end of his turn.
Yeah, so Glogowski can still attack with both, as both creatures present lethal damage, and that will force the double trade here with the Runaway Steamkins.
So he really needs a Chain Whirler now. That's his only kind of saving grace, and it is not a Chain Whirler.
That is not going to get it done. Even if Experimental Frenzy finds a 1-mana card, it's not going to be enough. And Canister, impatient here with the Your Go here, and a lethal attack.
All right, game number 1 done and dusted. Pretty, pretty clean. Adver didn't find what he needed. He needed that Goblin Chain Whirler. He needed to get some of those bodies off the board. But even then, just a top deck or 2 on Glogowski's side, just finding lethal.
So the important thing there was just Adver really needed to find land number 3. He was stuck on 2 lands for a little bit too long, And so he just wasn't able to come back into that game with that Goblin Chain Whirl and the other 3-drops that he had in his hand.
All right, so now we're going to see the other 2 decks from the opponents, which will be the Mono Blue Tempo and the Jund Warriors.
And you know, if you want to talk about like what exactly the pairings Adver wanted, I think this is kind of how he wanted the pairings to break out. The red-black aggro able to go slightly over the top of the mono red deck, and then of course Jund Warriors going up against Blue Tempo, because Jund Warriors plays 4 copies of Crawl Harpooner. Those are going to go a long way in this matchup, because anytime that Crawl Harpooner eats one of your 1-mana creatures, I usually want to go right-click or click on the little settings thing, concede, because you just feel so far behind, right? On top of that, you have the Goblin Chain Whirler and additional removal, and even something like a Rekindling Phoenix is problematic. Just a big flyer. You play that Rekindling Phoenix, that'll trade with the Tempest Djinn, but then if it does, you still get that token. So I think this is going to be a tough matchup for Glogowski because of all the multiple creatures that Adver can play that not only are solid on rate by themselves, but they also have the ability to kind of also be a tempo play, because you can eat creatures while you cast these spells.
Now, in your opinion, we're obviously only seeing the one mono blue tempo deck in this tournament. Between the other mono-colored decks, why did mono blue tempo fall out of favor, as it seems?
I think it's a combination of factors. I think, first of all, players just are getting a lot better at playing against the deck. I think early on, when you play against this deck, it's extremely tricky. You got Spell Pierce, you got Dive Down, you got Wizard's Retort, you have Merfolk Trickster. It's just a complete headache to play against. But if you put in the repetitions, you can start to figure out, hey, my opponent has 1 mana. These are the cards that he can have. So I'm going to try to play around so-and-so. And on top of that, players have also adjusted their main deck configurations so that they can have better game in this matchup. For example, a good example is a card like Crawl Harpooner. It was a card that didn't see a whole lot of play at the beginning of this, implementation of Standard. But then once Mono Blue became more and more popular, people started playing Crawl Harpooner into their decks. Even look at some of the mono green aggressive decks that we saw submitted into the format. They're still splashing red for specifically Collision Colossus to help them against flyers. So now, now we're in a metagame where people are a little bit more prepared, and it doesn't take that much. It doesn't take that much adjustment to be able to swing matchups, because I think, let's say, if people aren't prepared, Mono Blue might be an okay choice, maybe a 52%, 51% deck. But the moment all the mono red players start playing Crawl Harpooners with Unclaimed Territory, all of a sudden you just start questioning your life decisions coming into this tournament. But if you can kind of avoid Harpooner, I think the Mono Blue Tempo deck is a fine option, because you saw all the additional counter spells that the deck has. It's extremely tricky to play against, and I think it is slightly favorable against, for example, the Esper control deck.
All right, so the players are ready to rock and roll in this final round of the day. Taking a look at the opening hand here of Adver, Unclaimed Territory, Overgrown Tomb. And on the other side, we have 3 islands, an Opt, Dive Down, Spell Pierce, and Surge Mare. Not the worst opening hand. You would want to see one of the 1-drop creatures, perhaps, but the Surge Mare is not a bad option.
Yeah, the nice thing about Surge Mare is its sizing specifically. It's a 2-mana 0/5, which basically blocks all the creatures in the Jund aggressive deck. It blocks the Growth Chamber Guardian, that becomes a 4/4. Gruul Spellbreaker becomes a 4/4. Harpooner is a 3/2. It blocks the Chain Whirler. So the sizing just matches up perfectly against the creatures that they play. But it is a little bit awkward because, the 2 primary win conditions in the Mono Blue Tempo deck is 1-mana evasive creature into Curious Obsession into a protective spell. Alternatively, you want a Tempest Djinn with protection to win that way. But this hand has neither. But, you're playing a mix of lands and spells, you have some of that counter magic, and you have a Surge Mare, which is actually not embarrassing in this matchup.
Not at all. There you see the Mistcloaked Herald, the 1-drop. We were talking about evasive creatures, but Surge Mare hitting the board, making use of all the mana available to Glogowski.
But no
play, no play on the side there.
No cheap creatures, and this Lightning Strike not able to take down this Surge Mare just yet.
This is going to be a tricky pony to get rid of. And Adver will know that, so he'll look for the opening, perhaps, if the Surge Mare gets a little greedy and wants to give himself +2, -2.
Yeah, I imagine that the play for Glogowski is going to be just passing the turn here, and then maybe firing off a Merfolk Trickster end of turn with access to Spell Pierce and Dive Down. Alternatively, he can choose to attack with Surge Mare, pay 2 mana, gives Surgemare +2/-2, which then allows him to draw a card and discard a card,
Yep.
but you're not adding to the board that way, and you're kind of leaving yourself vulnerable to cards like Lightning Strike.
No real reason to attack there. You want to keep your creatures, you want to keep your best blocker, in essence, available to you.
Yeah, and Adver playing it slow here, playing it, not running out Goblin Chain Whirler here because he might be afraid of some counter magic that his opponent might have, and instead just keeping up Lightning Strike.
But this will be negated, in essence, with the dive down. And another Merfolk Trickster off the top for Glogowski as well.
Yeah, now that Adver is tapped out and Glogowski really does want to find one of his big evasive creatures, I could potentially see a situation here where he does choose to pump the Surgemare and get in for 4 with the Trickster. He's also not vulnerable to a Lightning Strike this turn because Adver is tapped out.
Yep. But just for now, deciding to go with Merfolk Trickster, playing out the Mist-Cloaked Herald, the evasive creature, which will die to a Chain Whirler.
Oh,
So
and,
let's
and
see.
here it is.
Rekindling Phoenix.
Running out the Phoenix instead. I mean, the Phoenix is an excellent blocker here.
Yes, indeed. But can't block the Mist-Cloaked Herald, so that'll just keep chipping away until Adver finds removal for it. Wizard's Retort off the top as well, another key card in this mono blue deck.
So now Glogowski is going to be able to get in for an attack for 5 here. However, he no longer has a way to kind of deal with that Rekindling Phoenix on the board. So if Adver chooses to, let's say, keep the Rekindling Phoenix back on defense, it's going to be really hard for Glogowski to get an attack in. And this is really interesting. He goes for the attack here before running out the Goblin Chain Whirler. So one of the risks of that is if your opponent does have a counterspell in something like Wizard's Retort, you're kind of wishing that you left back that Rekindling Phoenix on defense.
No blockers now for Adver.
But now we got a race here, and there's not much more for Glogowski to do with his mana. He might just choose to pump the Surgemare this turn and attack for 7 damage.
All right, let's see. Pony is getting in on the action here.
And this is a 2-turn clock here.
Oh, yeah.
Adver going
Surgemare
down to 6.
will discard an island because he just drew an island, so replacing itself in essence. Playing the land, dive down, and Spell Pierce still available. And not much happening in the hand of Adver there, only Status Statue.
Yeah. So I
Available
think that last turn specifically, I think it was really important for Adver to run out the Goblin Chain Whirler first before attacking, to see that the coast was clear to actually get in that attack with the Rekindling Phoenix.
Fierce Obsession now on the unblockable Mist-Cloaked Herald. Counting the mana there, seeing what Adver could possibly have in his hand to help him here.
So this is potentially, assuming Adver has
Potentially
nothing,
lethal.
this is potentially a lethal attack. If Glogowski attacks with everything,
Yes.
he can pump the Surgemare and go in for a lethal attack, and that's what he's going for here.
Yep.
So Adver now has to block one of the creatures on the battlefield, the Merfolk Trickster. And it looks like he's going to go for a Status Statue on the Surgemare.
Which will get...
Oh no, what is he going
on the
for?
enchantment.
It looks like the Curious Obsession, actually, which does help play around Dive Down
Yep.
specifically. So really heads up play here to play around Dive Down because he still
With
has
the mana
mana
available
to
for the
pay
Spell
for a
Pierce.
Spell Pierce.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So-
And this is exactly what I'm talking about. People just kind of know how to play against the mono blue deck a little bit better now. I mean, he's still in trouble.
Yep.
But-
Glogowski admitting that that was a very good play there from Adver. Draw a card. Yes, please. What'll I discard here? Spell Pierce, I think, yeah. It's getting to the point where Adver has enough mana to pay for anything that he might wish to cost. So Spell Pierce now the weaker card in Glogowski's hand.
But a land from Adver, I think this is just going to be game. On top of that, Glogowski can also run out a Siren Storm Tamer for additional protection for his creatures. But if he just chooses to attack with everything, pump the Surgemare, he's got the dive down to protect one of his creatures.
Yeah. Mist-Cloaked Herald is the target here, but the dive down will keep it safe. And that should be a good game. Swift 2-0. Thinking.
And that's it. Glogowski advances to the round of 16, defeating the challenger Adver. And we still have one mono blue deck alive in the tournament.
We do. There's still the potential to see that deck mess up everybody's plans in the top 16 because it seems like not many people were expecting to see mono blue in this, and they were correct. But do you think they haven't prepared for it? Are they prepared for the mono blue deck?
Well, I think it's more just thinking about the matchups because the mono blue tempo deck really does struggle against the more aggressive starts in mono red and mono white. It really truly struggles. Now, sure, you have 2 copies of Surge Mare, but that's still only 2 copies of Surge Mare. Outside of that, you're still playing a lot of cheap counter magic. And you know, when you play the mono blue tempo deck, you have just the most polarized games. Sometimes you're just like, I'm playing like an old format deck. I can't possibly lose. Why is nobody else doing this? Other time you're like, man, I got a really bad draft deck on my hands. You know, what's going on? My opponents are just killing me with all these 1-mana 2-1s and I don't know what to do with my life. But it's also a very solid option if you're looking, or if you're expecting a lot of control. And coming into this tournament, Esper Control variants, Esper Control and Esper Acuity are the 2 decks that were, you know, more than half the field submitted as one of their decks. So in that world, playing a mono blue deck tuned to beat that strategy is not a bad option.
All right, Becca is standing by with Piotr. Let's get a word from him now.
Look at this! Look, Piotr's got his happy hat on. What is this hat?
It's my propeller hat that I got from a fan once, and I wear it sometimes when I stream. My viewers like it, so I wanted to appease them by showing it off here.
But only when you got into the final 16. How does it know that you're moving on to tomorrow? Yeah, it feels pretty awesome. Now that you've seen that you are one of the only mono blue decks moving on, how does it feel, and how are you thinking that this is going to compare to everything else that everyone else brought?
Well, I will need to check what lineups exactly people brought, people who qualified for the top 16 brought, because, well, from what I've seen so far, it seems like it might match decently against many lineups that people brought. So
seems like it's going great. We're gonna hop back over to the caster's desk. Paul and Alias, let's hop in and see what the Asian Avenger and Taiju are up to.
Thank you so much, Becca. We are, of course, in the final game of the day. This is the last spot available in the top 16 of the Mythic Invitational, and it is the Asian Avenger versus Kakume. So, Paul, these decks, what are we looking at right here? Let's take a look.
It looks like we have Esper Control going up against Kakume's mono green Stompy deck. And not even you know, we've seen a lot of the mono green splashing red for Collision Colossus. Kakume is just going for the straight mono green deck. And look at this, Biogenic Ooze in his hand. That's a nice one.
We have not seen Biogenic Ooze at this tournament yet, so I really hope we'll see this card hit the board and just start making a whole bunch of little ooze babies that get bigger at the end of the turn.
Right, but this is going to be rough because taking a look at the Asian Avenger's hand, he's got Cry of the Carnarium here, and it's going to be great. This is going to be a clean 3-for-1 for the Asian Avenger. And look at Asian Avenger's hand, because the biggest weakness to this mono green deck are sweepers. Generally, Cry of the Carnarium often isn't good enough because the creatures are so big, but you know, Kaya's Wrath just does so much work in this matchup.
All right, so now we're seeing the Glacial Fortress hit the board. Kaya's Wrath will get rid of this Nullhide Ferox.
Yeah, but Kakume just needs to draw a land here to be able to run out that Biogenic Ooze in his hand, but he doesn't. But still a big threat, still got that Steel Leaf Champion.
Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, getting rid of that Steel Leaf Champion. Asian Avenger doesn't want to get hit by that mean-looking 5-4 there. Especially doesn't want him to make Gulta any cheaper.
Yeah, and as you can see here, Kakume, primary language being Japanese, so we see the cards in Japanese on his side of the battlefield.
Teferi now drawing a card, able to untap lands at the end step. Running out another Cry of the Carnarium.
Yeah, but if you just look at the pace of play, it's pretty clear. Like, the Asian Avenger has lots of experience playing Esper Control. I mean, he submitted 2 Esper Control decks coming into this tournament, so he knows exactly what's up, what threats he needs to deal with, and you know, he's firmly in the lead here. He's holding Absorb and Mortify with an active Teferi, and he's going to get pretty close to flipping that Search for Azcanta as well.
Perfect Branchwalker now hitting the board, exploring. What do we find on top? There's the Steel Leaf Champion that I believe Teferi tucked back in.
And I think you just want to use all the mana that you can every single turn. That's what the Asian Avenger is doing here, building up his graveyard for that Search for Azcanta.
5 cards now, I believe, in the bin. Teferi drawing another card. What do we find on top? Just another land. But Kaya will hit the board now and start munching things in the graveyard.
While also gaining life.
Yep. Because now there's actually creatures to hit, unlike in the control matchup, where the instants and sorceries do not count as life gains.
And look at this, the Asian Avenger only, if you notice, he only opted to remove one card off the Kaya, because with Kaya's activated ability, if you remove at least one creature, you gain 2 life. So he really wants to just remove one creature at a time to use it as a source of life gain.
So Kaya's just going to keep ticking up, getting rid of the creatures in the graveyard, gaining life for the Asian Avenger as well. Asian Avenger is taking a peek in the deck. Oh yeah, Cleansing Nova, that'll get rid of those pesky hexproof creatures.
Oh yeah.
And a whole bunch of oozes if it ever gets to that.
Yeah, and he is basically locked up the game at this point. He has way too many ways to get ahead on cards. It doesn't really matter because, you know, again, Kakume is running 1 card a turn. Meanwhile, the Asian Avenger, I can't even keep track. We have an Azcanta the Sunken Ruin on the battlefield. We have Teferi. And then, of course, we can use the Azcanta multiple times in 1 turn with the untap effect of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria.
Really good synergy between the cards in the deck. Thought Erasure, taking a peek. What don't I want to see? Goodbye, Papa Ooze. In the bin you go. Teferi drawing more cards again. What do we find this time? Still more land, but we have the Cleansing Nova available as well as the Absorb for whatever top deck may come from Kume.
And he's even got the moment of craving for the Branch Walker, and he's going to be ticking up this Kaya. So this game is very, very close to being over. We're at this point kind of what I like to say, we're just going through the motions here. The Esper control deck, of course, still taking some time to win. But it is very close to being locked up.
Steel Leaf Champion attempting to be cast, but the Absorb is in the hand of the Asian Avenger, so that will just hit the bin again, feeding Kaya some more delicious Steel Leaf Champions.
More cards from Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, more cards from Azcanta.
Just, would you like some cards? Yes, I'd like
yes,
several.
I would love all of the cards.
You.
Thank you very much.
Kaya ticking up. I have no idea how many cards are in exile there, but it's going to hurt when she eventually decides to
-5.
Masterminds.
And Masterminds acquisition should be the card that allows the Asian Avenger to close out the game if he so chooses here.
What does he go for here? Lyra, perhaps?
He can also just choose to make the game go longer if he wants, but it looks like Kakume has had enough, conceding game number 1 of the last remaining match to get into the round of 16.
Very, very good game there from the Asian Avenger. Unfortunately, not much to do once that Esper list gets going.
Right.
Super Friends on the board, getting so many looks into the deck with his Kanta as well. It's not much that you could do from Kakume's side.
Right, and on top of that, you also got to see Cry of the Carnarium. It's often not that good in that specific matchup because Cry of the Carnarium, you know, really good against. It was meant to be good against the mono red and mono white decks of the field, but the draws just happened to line up such that Cry of the Carnarium did a lot of work. But the thing is, when you're playing a mono green Stompy deck, you can honestly only just play one way. You're looking to beat down, play your big creatures, and just kind of hope your opponent does have multiple sweepers. If they do, you're probably just going to lose the game.
All right, let's take a look at the next game here. Seems to be mono red versus the Acuity deck.
And if the Asian Avenger wanted to kind of sequence his matchups, this is exactly what he wants. He wants the Dovin's Acuity deck to match up against the mono red deck. The main reason being, this is a deck that's playing not only multiple copies of Dovin's Acuity, which gains you life, but it also plays 4 copies of Revitalize. That's counter target Lightning Strike, draw a card for 2 mana.
Yeah, it's like, oh cool, you're going to be pinging me in the face? Well, I'll just gain a whole bunch of life.
Right.
I'm cool with that. So deciding now what he wants to play out in terms of his land. The Dovin's Acuity, I believe, will hit the board now. Drawing him a card, gaining him back to life.
Right.
Finding another land.
And of course, he does have the Kaya's Wrath here to get the current creatures on the battlefield off the board. Curious to see how much Kakume wants to put onto the battlefield, as he does have 2 additional creatures that he can play if he so chooses.
It's always a risky situation when you play out your creatures. You're like, do they have it? I don't know, but I really want to put these on the board and just hit you.
Right.
Yeah. Because next turn we will see the Wrath. You can see the indecision there. Do I play this Get to Lava Running? Yes, sure, let's go for it. Play out the other land. And I believe we're going to see the entire board go bye-bye.
Right.
There we go.
And yeah, just kind of the ideal start again for the Asian Avenger here. Turn 3 Dobin's Acuity into a sweeper against an aggressive creature deck.
Mortify as well in the hand of the Asian Avenger, ready to deal with any enchantments that would be on the side of Kakume.
I wonder if we're going to see a shock to the face to get that spectacle cost on Light Up the
think
Stage.
so,
It
yeah.
looks like that's what's going to happen here.
Drawing a land and an additional Rixmati Reveler.
And he's definitely going to be running this out here.
Oh yeah.
Cashing in one of those mountains for hopefully a more relevant card here.
Another Light Up the Stage, pretty good.
Oh, and look at this.
Oh, Vraska's
So
content.
much life gain. This is exactly why you bring Acuity to the tournament. Sure, it might be it might not match up perfectly against the other Esper control decks, but this is the Esper deck that you want to be playing when you face off against these other aggressive strategies.
Light Up the Stage being played there for the full cost, finding Fanatical Firebrand and a Goblin Chainwhirler. He has the option here to play the second Light Up the Stage. Do we go for that? Or we just let it sit there for a bit?
It looks
Just let
like
it mellow.
it looks like he's going to play it safe here. He's going to wait because he does have a play next turn in that Goblin Chainwhirler.
Dovin's Acuity down on the board again, drawing another land. Revitalize, main phase, Dovin's Acuity back to the hand.
And look at all the work the mono red deck has been trying to do to get the Asian Avenger's life total low, but he's still sitting at 18 here with Dovin's Acuity in hand and Mortify, which you can use to get back that Dovin's Acuity.
Light Up the Stage, now digging through the library for Kakume.
But Kakume doing everything he can. The Light Up the Stage is doing a ton of work here, getting him those additional cards. But wow,
Oh, Kaya's Wrath off the top. That's going to get rid of every single creature that has hit the board.
Asian Avenger
That's a pretty big
really
blowout
good
yet
at
again.
drawing sweepers
Yeah.
off the top of the deck. Very, very timely Kaya's Wrath there.
He's been summoning them. He's like, I would like this. Thank you. Right, good. So now in the hand of Kakume, it is just the burn spells as well as the Rixmati Reveler. No black source though, I believe, to fill out the hand. Main phase opt, getting Dovin's Acuity back to the hand, having a look at the top of the deck, drawing a card. You can do this all over again.
Yeah, and at this point, the only thing the Asian Avenger is looking for is just more instants to keep this Dovin's Acuity going. He already has 2 additional ways to trigger it with the Mortify and the Vraska's Contempt.
Shock and Lightning Strike looking pretty sad in that hand now. It's like, how do
Yeah,
I...
and this just has to be one of the mono red deck's worst matchup. I mean,
Yeah.
you're playing against a deck that has an enchantment that gains you life, draws cards, and it comes back again and again and again.
Of course, Mono Red not having any access to enchantment removal, so the Asian Avenger can just keep dropping that, keep bringing it back to the hand for as long as he likes. Risk factor here, probably take the damage, yeah. Feeling quite safe. Goblin Chainwhirler in the hand as well as the shock, though. It applies a little bit of pressure.
Oh, and look at this, very heads-up play here. Kakume opting not to play Chainwhirler here, thinking that it's extremely likely for his opponent to have a creature spell removal. But look at this, the Asian Avenger casting Mortify on his own Dovin's Acuity just to trigger it so that he can replay it to draw a card and gain 2 life.
That is cheeky, and I love it.
Mortify was basically just,
It's a dead card until something hits the
you know,
board.
6 mana, gain 2 life, draw a
Yeah,
card.
sure,
Hey,
why not?
do what you gotta do.
Very good play there. Let's see what the card is that Dovin's Acuity draws at the top. Still more land.
Yeah, the Asian Avenger definitely getting a little bit flooded here. You know, I think he would feel much safer if he found something like a Revitalize to kind of pad that life total.
Risk factor again. Taking the damage. He's got to be a little careful here.
Down to 7. That's a shock and a lightning strike, so that's 5 points of damage. Kakume actually only needs 1 more burn spell for lethal here.
Oh, this is getting close here.
But
Asian Avenger needs to be careful.
Oh, and look at that. That's a risk factor from Teruya Kakume. So the Asian Avenger drew Devious Cover-Up, which is a very, very strong counterspell. However, risk factor you can cast multiple times. Is he going to let this resolve?
I think that's getting covered up.
Get that Revitalize back in the deck. Come
Yeah.
on. You know you got to.
Gimme, gimme, gimme.
So he's putting all the instants that he can cast to bounce that Dovin's Acuity back into his deck with that Devious Cover-Up.
Saving his face from 3 points of damage. Risk factor still threatening, though, as well as the shock.
And keep in mind, because counter magic doesn't work especially well with Dovin's Acuity. You saw the devious cover-up being cast, but Dovin's Acuity only gets bounced.
That, oh.
Did he take it?
Oh, he took it.
He took it. Oh my
he
goodness!
took it,
Look
and
at this.
Fanatical Firebrand
Out of
off
nowhere.
the top. It's probably
This is not
getting,
attacking. This is not attacking.
Yeah, no, don't attack because you can't sack
Right.
and throw it at Asian Avenger's face here. But the Vraska's Contempt.
Shock to the face. Sack Fanatical
Oh,
Firebrand. That's lethal
that's lethal.
damage. Kakume clawing out of this.
Wow.
Wow, what just
What a
happened?
game. I did. That is
Kakume had
why-
2 cards in hand, and the Asian Avenger was at 18 life.
Wow.
But you saw the power of the risk factor, and the Asian Avenger choosing to take all of the damage from the risk factor. And that piles up, right? Because
Yes.
if you choose to take the damage every single time, every risk factor is 8 points of damage. And the Asian Avenger was like, look, I simply do not want to take the chance that you're going to draw multiple burn spells, so instead I'm just going to take all of that damage. But that last risk factor might have been a little much, because it's still possible that Kakume draws creatures instead of burn spells, because if he draws creatures, he has targets for the Vraska's Contempt that he had in his hand.
All right, so this is, I believe, game 3. Mono red, no, this is the red-black aggro with the Esper, no, this is the Esper Acuity that we're seeing now.
And that makes a lot of sense, because the Esper Acuity deck, I think, is the deck that's better suited against the aggressive strategies.
Certainly.
So that's why he's going for it here. And yeah, look at this. I mean, we didn't even see him draw Moment of Craving in that
not at
previous
all.
game.
It's very, very uncommon that what you saw in that previous game goes in the favor of the red player.
Absolutely.
But I think Kakume had a very, I think Kakume had a very patient playstyle.
Right.
He was waiting. Wasn't just throwing out the burn spells as often as he could, just to try and keep chipping away at the life turtle. He was like, all right, this is what I need to win, so I'm going to wait until the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Kakume not only qualified via the top, hitting the top 8 on the ladder, but is just a part of, you know, one of the strongest teams that compete in the Mythic Championships. And you saw that there. Yeah. He had the opportunity to run out Riskmati Reveler. He had the opportunity to run out Goblin Chain Whirler. But, you know, what can the Asian Avenger have in hand? He's got 5 cards in hand. It has to be a handful of removal spells. So recognizing that he doesn't want to give the Asian Avenger the opportunity to use removal spells to bounce the Dovin's Acuity and draw cards, he had a singular game plan, which was draw, burn, and lots of it.
Yes. Yes, the right play at the end of the day there for Kakume. I believe we are back in the action now with the Dovin's Acuity hitting the board for the Asian Avenger. Let's see what Kakume responds with here.
And it looks like the 2 creatures that you see on the right-hand side is a Lightning Strike and a Fanatical Firebrand. Those presumably have been revealed off a Light Up the Stage, so Kakume does really want to deploy those threats if he can.
Fanatical Firebrand getting in for that 1 point of damage. Vraska's Contempt. Gonna get rid of this this cheeky little goblin here.
Yeah, a bit of a clunky hand for the Asian Avenger.
Yeah.
You're using Vraska's Contempt to kill Firebrand, but keep in mind all the life points add up, and when they do add up, they kind of negate some of the burn that Kakume plays in his deck.
Yeah. So there is an Experimental Frenzy in the hand of Kakume, but there are also 2 Mortifies for the Asian Avenger, as well as counterspells. So I'm not sure we'll see that Experimental Frenzy hit the board, or at least stay very long.
And now you're going to see Dovin's Acuity into cast down on the Goblin Chain Whirler, bouncing the Dovin's Acuity. The Asian Avenger sitting at a very comfortable 23 life, this time with more ways to gain life in the 2 copies of Mortify along with an Absorb. So this is looking a lot better for the Asian Avenger. In the previous game, he flooded out, also took a lot of damage from the risk factor. I mean, we have to keep in mind that the chances of Kakume winning that game, that previous game, was super low. He had to draw 2 risk factors in a row to even have a chance to come back and win that game.
It's always such a toss-up when you're taking that damage, or like, do I take the 4, or do I potentially give my opponent even more ways to deal damage to me?
Right, but of course that's also the hallmark of the better players, because despite seemingly impossible odds, you still try to put yourself in the best position to try to win, and put yourself in a position to get those fortuitous draws.
So the Asian Avenger taking 2 damage on the shock land.
Oh, and look at this hand. This hand is dirty. But look at this. I mean, Dovin's Acuity, Revitalize, Absorb. This one I mean, I feel like Kakame can draw multiple risk factors in a row, and it's just not going to be enough here.
Rick's Mighty Reveler now hitting the board and drawing 3 cards for Kakame. Dovin's Acuity will hit the board again. And I believe possibly a Mortify or a Revitalize from Asian Avenger, but let's see what he wants to do here.
Yeah.
So many options.
I think you want to save that Mortify potentially for an Experimental Frenzy off the top, because that is one of your few ways to deal with it.
Yeah.
So if I had the opportunity, I would probably look to use other removal spells instead of a Mortify to deal with creatures.
So a little indecision here. What is my line of play? What is the best way to win this game? Dovin's Acuity hitting the board, and the Mortify getting rid of the Rick's Mighty Reveler. Dovin's Acuity coming back.
So there is the opportunity here, although keep in mind the Asian Avenger also has Mastermind's Acquisition. So if there is an Experimental Frenzy off the top, he can certainly use the Acquisition to find a way to deal with an Experimental Frenzy.
Goblin Chain Whirler now, as well as a Viashin, a Pyromancer.
And look at this, the Asian Avenger
like,
already
this is what I'm doing
signaling that he's
next.
going to be playing this Kaya's Wrath here, making sense. Getting a clean 2-for-1 here on the creatures.
Missed the opportunity there to bring the Dovin's Acuity back to hand, though.
Well, you can't do that, of course, because Kaya's Wrath is a sorcery. It only triggers off instants
yes.
that you play on your turn.
Correct.
Right.
So now we have a Risk Factor and a Lightning Strike as Kakume's options.
Right, but that's just 7 points of damage. But keep in mind, look at that Revitalize. That Revitalize is going to gain the Asian Avenger 3 life, and then bounce Dovin's Acuity, and then 2 more life on top of that.
Yep. Mastermind's Acquisition now fetching the prettiest angel of them all, Lyra Dawnbringer. I was hoping we would see this off of these sideboards.
Yeah, we haven't seen a lot of people fetch Lyra Dawnbringer. We've seen people get the Sacrament. We've seen people get Mirari Conjecture. Haven't seen many people get Lyra Dawnbringer. Take this time. You know what? I think you can take 4.
Yeah.
I think the coast is clear now.
You're okay. You're all right. Light up the stage. Digging for answers in Kakume's hand, potentially.
The Asian Avenger hates when his opponent draws more cards than him, so I can see him looking for the Absorb here.
He's like, I don't want you to have cards. I want to have the advantage.
And, firing off the Absorb on the Light Up the Stage. So, now the Lyra Dawnbringer, he doesn't have counter magic to protect it, but Kakume is going to have to use 2 burn spells to get this Lyra Dawnbringer off the battlefield. And Kakume has to draw it next turn. Otherwise, that single huge life point swing is probably just going to be enough to seal up the game.
Lyra Dawnbringer, of course, a flying 5/5 lifelink first strike that makes other angels have lifelink and first strike as well. Usually when people see her hit the board, you know, it's like, yeah, no, this isn't going to go well from here. So between her and Niv Mizzet, I don't know who's more terrifying.
I always feel like I can deal with Lyra, and I feel like I always lose to Niv Mizzet. But at the same time, I'm kind of a control player, so that makes sense.
All right. Not finding the other source of removal to get rid of Lyra Dawnbringer. Drawing 3 cards, though, off the Spectacled Rick's Mighty Reveler.
Oh, but look at this.
Mastermind's Acquisition again?
A second copy of Dovin's Acuity should seal this. He's going to go up to 19. Actually, first he's going to attack, go up to 22. This is a 4-turn clock. And look at Kakume's hand. No burn spells to speak of. This game is basically over.
I think Kakume might see the writing on the wall here, but not giving up, of course, because there is so much on the line. You want a spot in the top 16. You want to be playing tomorrow and on Sunday. So it's not over till it's over.
And the Asian Avenger at this point probably just wants to find a counterspell to protect that Lyra Dawnbringer.
Having a look now in his toolbox. Ethereal Absolution? Oh, no. What do I want? Decisions.
Yeah, negate would make a lot of sense here.
Yeah.
As just that way to protect the Lyra Dawnbringer.
Yeah. Taking a look in the graveyard. Do I want to grab this Mirari Conjecture? Bring back something to help me keep my threat alive.
And
Dovin's Acuity,
look at
drawing
this,
another
just
card.
all of the cards. And we're going to see a Revitalize here, bouncing both of the Dovin's Acuities. We've got Lyra Dawnbringer in play. I mean, this is basically just an Esper life gain deck.
Yeah.
And it really, truly preys on these mono red decks that basically are looking to finish you off with a bunch of burn spells.
In the hand of Kakame, we have the Fanatical Firebrand. We've got the Gitu Lava Runner, Rick's Mighty Reveler, and a Goblin Chain Whirler. But all these forces combined, I don't think are going to beat this Lyra. Sorry to say.
He did find a Wizard's Lightning and a Risk Factor, but again,
Needs
so
2
much
burn
life gain.
spells. Need to get this Angel off the board.
He can gain up to 9 life this turn if he so chooses with the double Dovin's Acuity and also attacking with the Lyra Dawnbringer.
Kakame, of course, only threatening 7 damage. And that's not even, it's not even that much compared to what Lyra's gaining. Mirari Conjecture now hitting the board. What are we finding? Absorb.
It looks like yeah, he's doing that to make sure that he can protect the Lyra Dawnbringer, and by doing that, he still has the ability to cast Down and keep up Absorb to deal with one of the creatures on the battlefield and protect Lyra Dawnbringer.
Land, Risk Factor, Lightning Strike, sorry, Wizard's Lightning. Kakame is just thinking, please, please, library, find me something. Cast down, getting rid of one of the wizards, sorry, the only wizard.
Yes, but the Asian Avenger is just comfortably outracing
Yeah.
this with that Lyra Dawnbringer on the battlefield and, of course, the 2 Dovin's Acuities in hand.
Mirari Conjecture bringing back these Mastermind's Acquisition. We can go shopping again. Let's go and, you know, go browsing, see what else we want to find in our toolbox if needs be. But I think at this point, there might not be a need.
Yeah.
Waiting as well for the 3rd chapter to potentially find extra presents.
Yeah, and again, Asian Avenger can safely
Yeah.
take that damage now because of that Lyra Dawnbringer on the battlefield, and we're going to see some Dovin's Acuities being cast. I think probably the Asian Avenger is going to be looking to play Dovin's Acuity and just make sure he has access to double counterspell up here in Absorb/Negate.
Oh, yeah.
And I think by tapping like this, he does have access to double counter here, and he's at 25 life. Look at all the damage that Kakame's tried to do. I mean, how much damage has he done this game? 30? 40? Who knows? But it just hasn't even been close to enough.
Tis but a scratch for the Asian Avenger at this point. The red deck just running out of steam, unfortunately. Not able to replicate what we saw in the 2nd match. There is, of course, the Wizard's Lightning and the Shock, which can get rid of Lyra Dawnbringer. But there is also the Absorb in the Asian Avenger's hand, which will thwart any plans of killing the Angel.
The Asian Avenger back to his starting life total here at 20 life.
Easy negate, getting rid of the Wizard's Lightning.
And this should prompt the concession.
There we go. Congratulations to the Asian Avenger, taking the final slot in the top 16 here at the Mythic Invitational at PAX East. What a crazy 2 days.
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah, and you know, I will say that I really truly enjoyed watching both of these players play slightly different decks because, you know, throughout the course of today and yesterday, we've seen a lot of kind of the same configurations, and it was nice to just see people trying to mix it up there. And, you know, the one thing that kind of surprised me a little bit there was Kakame's decision to play the mono red deck. I know he won, but he was a heavy dog even when he won game 2, and the mono red deck just seems like it matches up quite poorly against the strategy of the Acuity deck. So I'm curious, you know, if, he must think that the mono green Stompy deck just doesn't match up very well against the Esper Control deck.
All right, well, let's hear from the Asian Avenger, who is standing with Becca.